Honey, it is not cheating if it is for the family's future. Think of it as a business merger. And you, well, you can be the maid. That is what my husband and mother-in-law said when they forced me to accept a billionaire widow as a second wife. They thought I was a leech in this $1 million mansion, but they forgot the deed is not in his name, and her fortune is fake. The price of their greed will be the coldest rain of their lives. My name is Harper Whitmore. I am 32 years old, and at this exact moment, the only thing keeping me from screaming is the delicate surgical precision required to reconstruct the nose of a cherub on a 19th century plaster relief. The air in my private studio was thick with the scent of linseed oil, mineral spirits, and the dry, chalky dust of ancient gypsum. To most, it might smell like a construction site, but to me, it smelled like history. It smelled like purpose. I stood on a rolling scaffold, my back aching with a dull, throbbing rhythm that had become my constant companion over the last decade. My hands, encased in thin nitrile gloves, moved with the steady grace of a bomb disposal expert. One slip, one tremor, and a piece of art worth more than a luxury sedan would be ruined. I was a heritage restoration architect, a title that commanded respect in the high-end auction houses of New York and the private galleries of London. My waitlist was 2 years long. My fees were astronomical. But here, within the gated community of Sapphire Hills, inside the walls of the sprawling mansion that technically belonged to me, I was something else entirely. I was the help. I was the embarrassment. I was the invisible bank account that kept the lights on. A sharp, incessant buzzing from the intercom on the wall shattered my concentration. I exhaled a long, controlled breath, carefully setting down my scalpel before pressing the button. "Harper," the voice crackled through the speaker, dripping with a mixture of impatience and disdain. It was Patricia. "Are you going to hide in that dusty shed all day? The tea is getting cold. And Ethan cannot find his cufflinks, the gold ones, not the cheap silver ones you tried to pawn off on him last week. I will be right there. Patricia," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the exhaustion that weighed on my eyelids. I stripped off my gloves, revealing hands that were stained with faint traces of walnut ink and flecks of gold leaf. I wiped a smudge of white plaster from my cheek, though I knew it was futile. I always looked like a mess when I worked. I stepped out of the climate-controlled sanctuary of my studio, a converted guest house at the rear of the property, and walked across the manicured lawn toward the main residence. The late afternoon sun of Southern California beat down on the perfectly green grass that cost me $3,000 a month to keep lush in this drought-prone climate. As I opened the French doors leading into the main living room, the sensory shift was violent. I left behind the honest, sharp smells of chemicals and earth and was assaulted by the cloying, suffocating scent of expensive floral perfume and imported bergamot tea. The interior of the house was cool, kept at a constant 68 degrees, a luxury that bloated the electricity bill to obscene levels. Patricia sat on the Italian velvet sofa, her legs crossed, sipping from a bone china cup. She wore a silk robe that shimmered under the crystal chandelier. Opposite her, my husband, Ethan, was scrolling through his phone, his face twisted in a scowl. "Finally," Patricia sighed, setting her cup down with a deliberate clatter. She looked me up and down, her lip curling as if she had just smelled something rotting. "Look at you, Harper. You look like a common laborer. It is embarrassing. If the neighbors saw you walking across the lawn like that, they would think we were hiring undocumented workers to fix the roof." "I was working, Patricia," I said quietly, walking toward the stairs. "Restoration takes time." "Work," Ethan scoffed, not looking up from his screen. "Playing with mud and glue is not work. Harper, it is a hobby, a messy, unproductive hobby that distracts you from your actual duties." I stopped with my hand on the banister. Ethan worked at Zenith Corp, a mid-sized logistics firm where he managed digital filing systems. He liked to tell people he was in strategic operations, but in reality, he organized spreadsheets. "I need my Navy suit." "Harper," Ethan said, finally looking at me. His eyes held no affection, only the dull irritation of a man whose expectations were constantly, in his mind, unmet. The one with the pinstripes. I have a presentation today, a big one. The regional director might be there. It is hanging in your closet, Ethan, I said. I picked it up from the dry cleaners on Tuesday. It is in the garment bag, exactly where it always is. Well, I could not see it, he snapped. Standing up, he was handsome in a conventional, polished way, but his vanity was beginning to erode his looks. Lines of petulance were etching themselves around his mouth. He walked over to the mirror in the hallway, adjusting his tie. You should have laid it out on the bed. A supportive wife anticipates her husband's needs. She does not make him hunt for his own clothing like a savage. I will remember that for next time, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Patricia chimed in, extending her hand to examine her freshly manicured nails. And speaking of appearances, Harper, you simply must do something about your hands before tonight. We are hosting the committee for the Sapphire Hills Charity Gala. These are high society women. If they see those calluses and those stains on your fingers, they will think Ethan married a mechanic. It reflects poorly on his breeding. I looked down at my hands. They were strong. They were capable. They had restored 16th century frescoes and stabilized crumbling Romanesque arches. But to Patricia, they were just ugly. I will wear gloves while I serve the appetizers, I said. See that you do, she replied, waving a hand dismissively. And try to wear something that does not smell like turpentine. Perhaps that gray dress. It is plain, but at least it fades into the background. I went upstairs to shower, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the smell of the studio, not because I was ashamed of it, but because I did not want to give them more ammunition. As the hot water hit my back, I thought about the stack of bills sitting on my desk in the studio. The property tax for this year was $45,000. The maintenance fee for the community was $800 a month. The water bill, thanks to Patricia's 3 daily baths and the sprinkler system, was over $400. Ethan did not know about these numbers, or rather, he chose not to know. When I came back downstairs, dressed in the drab gray dress Patricia had suggested, the smell of dinner preparation had begun to fill the house, warring with the perfume. I had been up since 5 a.m. to start the prep work for the beef Wellington Patricia had demanded. It was a complex dish, requiring perfect timing and high-quality ingredients. I walked into the kitchen, which was pristine and white, a showroom kitchen that Patricia loved to show off, but never cooked in. I tied an apron over my dress and got to work. The rhythmic chopping of shallots, the searing of the beef tenderloin, the delicate rolling of the puff pastry, it was a dance I knew well. Through the open archway, I could see them in the living room. The television was on, tuned to a reality show about billionaires and yachts. Look at that boat, Ethan said, pointing at the screen. That is the life, Mom. That is where I belong. Once I get this promotion at Zenith, we are going to upgrade, maybe a place in Malibu, somewhere with an ocean view. You deserve it, sweetie, Patricia cooed. You work so hard, unlike some people who just tinker around in the backyard. I tightened my grip on the knife, slicing through a mushroom with a little more force than necessary. Then came the ritual I dreaded most. Ethan walked into the kitchen, holding a small white envelope. He held it out to me with a benevolent smile, like a king bestowing alms upon a beggar. Here is the household allowance for the month, he said, placing it on the counter next to the raw beef. Make it stretch. Harper, I noticed we went over budget on groceries last month. We need to be fiscally responsible if we are going to build our empire. I did not need to open the envelope to know what was inside. $500. $500 to feed 3 adults for a month, buy cleaning supplies, and cover any minor emergencies. It was a joke. It was an insult. It would not even cover the cost of the tenderloin and the truffle pâté I was using for tonight's dinner, let alone the wine Patricia drank like water. Thank you, Ethan, I said, my voice flat. I know it is generous, he said, puffing out his chest. but I want you to have the best resources to take care of us." He turned and walked back to the sofa, leaving me staring at the envelope. I reached into the hidden pocket of my apron and touched the cold, hard metal of my own wallet. Inside sat my Centurion card, the heavy black titanium card that was linked to my business account, the account that paid the mortgage, the insurance, the landscaping, the pool guy, and the very ingredients Ethan was about to eat. I paid for his life. I paid for his mother's life. And they treated me like a squatter who should be grateful for the crumbs they swept off the table. 2 hours later, dinner was served. The dining room was dim, lit only by candles. I brought out the beef Wellington, its golden brown crust glistening under the light. I had plated it with a red wine reduction and roasted asparagus, exactly the way a 5-star chef would. Patricia picked up her fork and knife, cutting into the pastry. She chewed slowly, her face unreadable. Ethan shoveled a large piece into his mouth, barely tasting it. "It is acceptable," Patricia said finally, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "But the pastry is a bit soggy at the bottom, Harper. And the beef. It is a little chewy. When Ethan took me to Le Jardin for my birthday last year, their Wellington melted in your mouth. This requires effort to chew." I stood by the sideboard, my hands clasped behind my back. I remembered that birthday dinner at Le Jardin. I remembered it well because when the check came $850, Ethan's card had been declined. I had quietly handed the waiter my card under the table, while Ethan pretended to be outraged at the bank's error. "I am sorry it is not up to your standards. Patricia," I said, "I use the same butcher Le Jardin uses." "Well, maybe it is the technique," she said dismissively. "You cannot expect a home cook to replicate the genius of a French master chef. It is fine. Harper, we will eat it. We do not want to be wasteful, do we?" "No, Mom is right," Ethan said, talking with his mouth full. "It is good, babe. Just maybe watch a few more YouTube videos next time. Level up your game." He winked at me, a gesture that was meant to be charming but felt condescending. I watched them eat, these two people who consumed my labor, my money, and my patience with the voracious appetite of parasites. I felt a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Why did I stay? The question haunted me every time I looked at the peeling paint in the hallway that Patricia refused to let me fix because she wanted to hire a professional. I stayed because of a promise. I closed my eyes for a second and saw Arthur Harris, Ethan's father. I saw him lying in that hospital bed 5 years ago, his face pale and gaunt. Arthur had been the one who discovered my talent when I was a struggling art student. He had funded my first restoration project. He had been a father to me when my own had vanished. "Promise me, Harper," he had wheezed, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Ethan, he is weak. He has been spoiled by his mother, but there is a good man in there somewhere. Promise me you will help him grow up. Promise me you will not let him fail." "I promise, Arthur," I had whispered. I opened my eyes. The candlelight flickered on Ethan's face as he laughed at something Patricia said. A cruel joke about a neighbor's weight. I had kept my promise. I had protected Ethan from the harsh realities of the world. I had provided a safety net so plush he did not even know he was falling. But Arthur had asked me to help him grow up. He had not asked me to be a doormat. He had not asked me to destroy myself to keep his son warm. My gaze shifted from Ethan to the knife resting on his plate. Sharp, shiny, the reservoir of my patience, once a deep and vast ocean, was now a shallow puddle, evaporating rapidly under the heat of their ingratitude. I looked at my hands, the hands they despised. They were shaking slightly, not from fatigue this time, but from a rage that was beginning to wake up after a long, long slumber. "Is there any dessert?" Patricia asked, breaking the silence. "I feel like something sweet to wash away the taste of that meat." "I made a crème brûlée," I said. "Well, bring it out then," she commanded. "And do not forget the espresso. And Harper, try not to chip the saucer this time." "Yes, Patricia," I said, right away. I turned back toward the kitchen. the heavy door swinging shut behind me, muffling their laughter. The promise to Arthur still held, but the terms and conditions were about to change. I just did not know it yet, while I was busy scraping away centuries of grime in my studio, trying to salvage the past. My husband was busy trying to salvage his crumbling ego at the offices of Zenith Corp. To hear Ethan tell it, Zenith was a titan of industry and he was its indispensable strategist. The reality, however, was a beige cubicle in a windowless room on the 4th floor, illuminated by the soul-sucking hum of fluorescent lights. Ethan was not a director. He was not a manager. He was a senior data entry coordinator, a title that sounded impressive only if you did not know it meant he spent 8 hours a day moving digital files from one folder to another, and he was not even doing that well. That very morning, while I was calculating the structural integrity of plaster, Ethan was standing in the office of his supervisor, Mr. Henderson, sweating through the starch of the shirt I had ironed for him. "This is the 3rd time this month, Harris," Henderson said, tossing a file onto his desk. The man looked tired. He did not look like he was addressing a future titan of industry. He looked like he was talking to a liability. "You mislabeled the shipping manifest for the entire Southwest region. Do you have any idea how much time it had to spend unscrambling your mess?" "It was a system error," Ethan lied, his voice tight. "The interface is laggy. I have been telling tech support about it for weeks." "Everyone else seems to manage just fine," Henderson replied, rubbing his temples. "Look, Ethan, we are downsizing. Corporate is looking at efficiency metrics. Right now, your metrics are in the red. Consider this your final unofficial warning. Get it together, or start updating your resume." Ethan walked out of that office, not with humility, but with a simmering, toxic resentment. He did not blame his lack of attention to detail. He did not blame his laziness. In the twisted narrative of his mind, he blamed his environment. He blamed the stress. He blamed me. He went to the break room for lunch, heating up the gourmet leftovers I had packed for him in a Tupperware container. As he sat there, 2 of his colleagues, Brad and Jason, sat down at the adjacent table. These were the men Ethan desperately wanted to be. They were in sales, driving leased BMWs and wearing watches that cost more than Ethan's annual salary. "So I told her," Brad was saying, laughing loudly, "Babe, if you want the breast augmentation, just book it. It is a tax write-off if I take you to client dinners, right?" "Nice," Jason agreed, fist-bumping him. "We are heading to Cabo next week. My wife wants to look at vacation homes. She says the vibe in California is getting too stale. She wants luxury, you know, and honestly, she deserves it. A man who cannot spoil his woman is not really a man. Is he?" Ethan looked down at his fork. He thought about me. He thought about my gray dress, my hands stained with walnut ink, and the smell of mineral spirits that clung to my hair. He did not see a partner who paid his mortgage. He saw an anchor. He saw a woman who had no interest in plastic surgery or Cabo. A woman who worked with her hands like a peasant. He felt a surge of shame so hot it made his ears burn. He felt that he was destined for the life Brad and Jason had. But I was the one holding him back. I was the reason he was not a CEO. If he had a wife who demanded excellence, who looked like a trophy, surely he would rise to the occasion. While Ethan was stewing in his own inadequacy, his mother was busy spending money she did not earn. Patricia was at the Serenity Spa, a high-end sanctuary of marble and orchids located in the most expensive district of the city. She was currently enjoying a hot stone massage and a gold leaf facial, a package that cost $600. She had paid for it with the supplementary credit card Ethan had given her, the one that was automatically paid off by my business account at the end of every month. After her treatment, she sat in the VIP lounge, wrapped in a plush white robe, sipping cucumber water. This was her natural habitat, or so she believed. She sat near a group of women who were draped in designer logos, listening intently to their conversation. "Monogamy is so middle class," one woman with lips injected to the bursting point was saying. "My husband just acquired a second partner. She is young. She manages his travel schedule, and honestly, it takes the pressure off me. We are like a corporation now. More assets, more manpower. It is the new power move, another agreed. Why limit the family wealth if a man can support 2 queens? He is a king. It is simple economics. Patricia's ears perked up. A king. That was what she always called Ethan. Her baby was a king who had been tricked into marrying a pauper. The lounge door opened, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. A woman entered who seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the space. She was flamboyant in a way that screamed money, or at least the desperate desire to be seen as money. She wore a leopard print caftan that flowed behind her like a royal cape, and her fingers were weighed down by rings that flashed aggressively under the halogen lights. This was Bianca St. Clair. She was somewhere in her 40s, with hair dyed a shade of blonde that existed nowhere in nature, and a tan that was 3 shades too dark. She walked to the lounger next to Patricia, sighing loudly, a sound of theatrical exhaustion. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, her voice carrying a thick, affected Texan drawl that slipped occasionally. "Please, sit," Patricia said. Sensing an opportunity, she adjusted her robe to show off the diamond tennis bracelet I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. Bianca collapsed onto the lounger and immediately pulled out a jeweled iPhone. "Sell the villa in Tuscany," she barked into the phone, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I told you, the maintenance is a headache, and tell the trust fund manager to release another $50,000 for my shopping trip. I am bored." She hung up and looked at Patricia, rolling her eyes. "Lawyers," she groaned. "They are parasites. My late husband, God rest his soul, left me an empire, but he did not leave me enough patience to deal with the paperwork." Patricia's heart skipped a beat. A widow, an empire, $50,000 for a shopping trip. "It sounds exhausting," Patricia sympathized, leaning in. "I am Patricia. My son is in finance, so I understand the burden of asset management." "I am Bianca Sinclair," the woman said, extending a hand loaded with rocks that looked like diamonds. "My husband was Big Jim Sinclair, Texas Oil. Perhaps you have heard of him." Patricia had not, but she nodded vigorously. "Of course, who has not?" "I just moved here," Bianca continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "To be honest, Patricia, I am drowning. I have cash. I have properties. I have oil royalties coming in every month. But a woman needs a man to steer the ship. I am lonely. I have all this gold, and no king to share it with." The bait was not just in the water. It was being shoved down Patricia's throat, and she swallowed it whole. "My son, Ethan," Patricia began, the lie forming on her tongue like sugar syrup, "is a CEO. He runs Zenith Corp, a massive logistics firm. He is incredibly successful, handsome, strong, a true alpha male." Bianca's eyes lit up, the predatory gleam hidden behind thick false lashes. "A CEO. Is he married?" Patricia hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "He is entangled. He married young. A mistake, really. The girl is simple. She is a nobody. She manages the house, cooks the meals. She is basically staff with a marriage license. Ethan has outgrown her. He needs a woman of substance, a woman of caliber." Bianca smiled, a slow, shark-like grin. She leaned closer, the smell of her heavy, musk-based perfume overpowering the scent of lavender in the room. "You know, Patricia," Bianca purred, "in my circles, we do not let a little thing like a marriage license stand in the way of a merger. My late husband always said that a great man needs a team. If your son is as powerful as you say, why should he settle for one mediocre wife when he could have an empire?" "What do you mean?" Patricia asked, breathless. "Modern polygamy." Bianca whispered the words like a spell. "It is very trendy among the ultra-wealthy in Dubai and Texas. It is not cheating, it is expanding the portfolio. If this simple girl is good at cooking and cleaning, keep her. Let her run the household. but bring in a real partner to run the dynasty. I am looking for a husband, Patricia, and I am willing to share. Provided the man is worth it, I need someone to help me manage my $50 million trust fund. $50 million. The number exploded in Patricia's brain like fireworks. $50 million would buy a lot of respect. It would buy the admiration of her friends. It would buy the life she felt she was owed. Ethan owns a magnificent estate in Sapphire Hills, Patricia lied, doubling down. It is a palace. He built it from the ground up. I love Sapphire Hills, Bianca cooed. I have been looking to buy there, but I would much rather move into a home that already has a strong man in it. Maybe I could come over to discuss business. You must, Patricia insisted, her hands trembling with excitement. You absolutely must. When Patricia left the spa that afternoon, she did not see the sky or the trees. She saw only dollar signs. She drove home in her leased sedan, her mind racing with a plan so twisted, so morally bankrupt, that it made perfect sense to her. Harper was the obstacle. Harper was the anchor dragging Ethan down, but Bianca was the sail. If they could just convince Harper to accept her place, her true place. As the servant she practically was already, Ethan could legally marry Bianca. They could access that oil money. They could have it all. Harper would never leave, Patricia reasoned. Harper was pathetic. She had no family, no money of her own, nowhere to go. She was lucky they let her live in the house at all. As Patricia pulled into the driveway of my mansion, she looked at the facade and smiled. She did not see my name on the deed. She saw her son's future kingdom, funded by a Texas oil widow, built on the back of my silence. She walked into the house, ready to sell her son's soul and my dignity for a pot of gold that did not exist. The trap was set 3 days later, and like a dutiful fool, I was the one who paid for the bait. Harper, Patricia had called out from the living room that morning, her voice laced with feigned exhaustion. I am meeting an old friend for lunch at the Golden Swan. Reserve a table for 3. Ethan needs to come along to network. Put down your card for the deposit. The system is down on mine. The Golden Swan. The kind of place where a salad cost $40 and the waiters judged your shoes. I made the reservation, pre-authorizing a $300 hold on my card. Assuming Patricia was meeting one of her bridge club harpies, I had no idea I was funding the audition for my own replacement at the restaurant. The scene played out exactly as Patricia had orchestrated. Ethan arrived in his ill-fitting suit, already sweating from the stress of a morning spent dodging his boss's emails. He expected a boring lunch with his mother's elderly friends. Instead, he walked into the VIP booth and saw Bianca St. Clair. She was wearing a red dress that was illegal in 3 states, plunging dangerously low and clinging to curves that were clearly engineered by a very expensive surgeon. She was draped in gold-heavy, chunky necklaces that clanked when she moved. To a man of taste, she would have looked gaudy. To Ethan, who equated shininess with success, she looked like a goddess. Ethan, Patricia beamed, standing up. This is Bianca, the lady I told you about, the one with the oil empire. Bianca extended a hand, her wrist limp, demanding to be kissed. So this is the CEO, she purred, her eyes scanning him like a butcher assessing a cut of meat. Your mother says you run the logistics world. Darling, I do love a man who knows how to move things around. Ethan took her hand, his palms damp. He stammered, mesmerized. Yes. I manage strategic operations. It is very complex. I bet it is. Bianca winked. She patted the velvet seat next to her. Sit. I need a big brain like yours right next to me. I have been looking at my portfolio all morning and frankly, all those zeros are giving me a migraine. I need a man's opinion on where to park a few $1 million this quarter. For the next 2 hours, Bianca played Ethan like a fiddle. She asked him questions about market volatility and asset liquidity, nodding intently as he spouted nonsense he had skimmed from finance blogs. She touched his arm every time she laughed, She leaned in close, letting him smell her expensive perfume, letting him feel the proximity of what he thought was unlimited wealth. "You know, Ethan," she said, tracing the rim of her wine glass, "my late husband left me a trust fund, $50 million. But there is a catch. The lawyers say I cannot access the principal amount unless I am married. Some archaic clause about family stability. Can you believe that I have $50 million sitting in a vault, gathering dust, just because I do not have a ring on my finger?" Ethan choked on his lobster bisque. $50 million. $50 million, she confirmed, her voice a husky whisper. "And the man who helps me unlock it, well, naturally, as my husband, he would be entitled to half, $25 million just for signing a piece of paper. If only I could find a man who was not intimidated by my success, a man who was already a king in his own right." She looked at him with wide, pleading eyes. "You seem so stable, Ethan, so secure. Your wife is a lucky woman, although—" She paused, letting the silence hang. "Patricia tells me she is not exactly ambitious. That must be hard for a man of your stature, dragging dead weight up the mountain." Ethan went home that evening in a daze. The seed had been planted, watered, and fertilized with greed. He walked through the front door and the first thing he saw was me. I was on my hands and knees in the foyer. The housekeeper had called in sick, and a delivery man had tracked mud across the marble floor. I was scrubbing it with a sponge, my hair tied back in a messy bun, wearing an old t-shirt covered in paint stains. Ethan stopped and looked down at me. He did not see his wife. He did not see the woman who had paid for the shirt on his back. He saw a maid. He saw dead weight. The contrast between Bianca shimmering in red silk and gold and me scrubbing dirt in silence was the final blow to his loyalty. "You missed a spot," he muttered, stepping over my legs as if I were a piece of furniture. He went straight to the study, where Patricia was already waiting, a glass of sherry in her hand. She closed the door and locked it. "You saw it, didn't you?" Patricia whispered, her eyes manic. "You saw the potential. She likes you, Ethan. She practically threw herself at you. She has $50 million, Mom," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "She said if she marries, the husband gets half, $25 million. Think of what we could do with that," Patricia urged. "We could buy the island. We could start your own firm. You would never have to answer to that idiot Henderson again. You would be the boss." "But I am married," Ethan said, sinking into the leather chair. "I can't just divorce Harper, the alimony, the division of assets. She has been here for 5 years." "Who said anything about alimony?" Patricia hissed, leaning across the desk. "Listen to me. Bianca is open-minded. She told me. She is from that world. Ethan, the world where powerful men have whatever they want. She suggested an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "Polygamy." Patricia said the word like it was a solution to a math problem. "Or at least, a functional version of it. We tell Harper the truth about our financial goals. We tell her that this marriage to Bianca is a business merger, a strategic alliance to secure the family's future." "Harper will never agree to that," Ethan said, shaking his head. "She has pride." "Does she?" Patricia scoffed. "Look at her, Ethan. She spends her days playing with mud. She dresses like a hobo. She has no friends, no family, no career that anyone has ever heard of. Where would she go to a shelter? She loves you. Ethan, she is obsessed with you. She stays because she needs us. She needs this house." Ethan was silent. He thought about the red metrics on his computer screen at work. He thought about the maxed-out credit card bill in his pocket. He thought about Jason and Brad going to Cabo. "We tell her it is temporary," Patricia continued, seeing his resolve weaken, "or we tell her she can stay. But her role changes. She becomes the domestic manager. Bianca is the public wife, the financial partner. Harper is the private wife, the one who keeps the house running. It is perfect. You get the money, and you still get your laundry done. Domestic manager. Ethan tested the words. It sounded better than servant. It sounded like a job title. We have to be firm, Patricia instructed. We have to make her feel like she is the problem, like she is holding you back. If we break her confidence, she will accept anything just to stay. We tell her she is useless. We tell her she is a burden, and that this is her only way to be useful to the family. 25 million, Ethan whispered again. Do it for us, Patricia said, squeezing his hand. Do it for your mother. Do it for the dynasty. Ethan took a deep breath. The last shred of his conscience flickered and died, extinguished by the blinding light of imaginary gold. Okay, he said. Let's do it. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the house shifted from passive disdain to active psychological warfare. They began their campaign to break me immediately. At dinner that night, Ethan pushed his plate away. This chicken is dry. Harper, God, can't you do anything right? I work all day providing for this family, and I come home to sawdust. I followed the recipe, I said calmly. Maybe that is the problem, Patricia sneered. You have no instinct, no class. Bianca. She was telling us about the private chefs she employs. People with talent, people who contribute. You need to step up. Harper, Ethan said, looking at me with cold, dead eyes. I am out there trying to build a future, trying to elevate us to the next level. And you, what do? You hide in that shed. You bring nothing to the table. Zero value. I maintain the house. Ethan, I said, I take care of everything. Maintaining is not growing. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. You are stagnant. You are an anchor. Harper, I am trying to fly, and you are dragging me down into mediocrity. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a wife who looks like a gardener? I looked at him. I looked at the man who was currently wearing a watch I had bought him for his birthday, eating food I had paid for, sitting in a chair I owned. I am sorry you feel that way, I said, my voice quiet. Sorry is not enough, Patricia said. We need solutions. We need capital. We need connections. Things you clearly cannot provide. Ethan needs a partner who can help him conquer the world, not someone who just dusts it. They watched me, waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to beg for forgiveness, waiting for me to ask how I could be better. They wanted to see me crumble so they could rebuild me as their obedient servant. But I did not crumble. I cut a piece of chicken, put it in my mouth, and chewed slowly. It was perfectly moist. I will try to be more valuable, I said, the ambiguity of my words flying right over their heads. They exchanged a triumphant look. They thought they were winning. They thought they were manipulating a weak, dependent woman into submission. They had no idea they were poking a sleeping dragon, and the fire was already gathering in my throat. The game had begun, and they were playing checkers while I was playing three-dimensional chess. The humiliation began at 6 o'clock in the evening, exactly 1 hour before our guest was scheduled to arrive. Patricia marched into the kitchen, holding a garment bag that smelled faintly of plastic and desperation. She unzipped it to reveal a black dress with a white apron, the kind of costume one might find in a discount Halloween store labeled Sassy Maid. Put this on, she commanded, tossing it onto the pristine granite island I had just finished polishing. You cannot be serious, I said, looking at the polyester monstrosity. I am the lady of this house. Patricia, I am not wearing a costume. You are the obstacle. Harper, she snapped, her eyes hard. We need Bianca to feel comfortable. If she sees you parading around in your normal clothes, acting like you have equal status, she might feel threatened. She might take her $50 million and go elsewhere. Do you want to be the reason Ethan fails again? Just put it on. Harper, Ethan added, walking in and adjusting his tie in the reflection of the oven door. He looked nervous, his face shiny with sweat. It is just for one night. Think of it as role play. You are helping the team. Besides, it fits your skill set. I looked at my husband. I looked at the cheap dress. A dark, twisted laugh bubbled in my chest, but I swallowed it down. If they wanted a maid, I would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Fine, I said, taking the dress. But if I am the maid, I expect a tip. At 7 o'clock sharp, a white stretch limousine pulled up to the curb. It was not a modern vehicle. It was a Lincoln Town car from the early 2000s, the kind that prom kids rented to feel important. It was comically long for the driveway, blocking the path to the garage entirely. I stood by the front door, smoothing the scratchy apron over my waist. Patricia and Ethan rushed out to greet her, their faces plastered with eager, sycophantic smiles. The chauffeur, a bored-looking man chewing gum, opened the back door. First came a leg, encased in a fishnet stocking and a red-bottomed heel that I instantly recognized as a knockoff. The shade of red was too orange, the arch too shallow. Then came Bianca St. Clair. She emerged like a butterfly exiting a cocoon. If the butterfly was covered in sequins and fake fur, she wore a white coat that was meant to look like mink, but moved stiffly like synthetic plush. Her hair was teased into a blonde helmet, defying both gravity and good taste. "Welcome to our humble abode," Patricia cried, actually curtsying slightly. "Oh, darling," Bianca exclaimed, her voice booming. She looked up at the house, her eyes scanning the facade. "It is charming, so rustic, like a little cottage. My house is 6,000 square feet of Mediterranean revival architecture." Calling it a cottage was like calling the Titanic a canoe. They ushered her inside. I stood by the door, head bowed, hands clasped, channeling every Downton Abbey extra I had ever seen. "And this must be the help," Bianca said, stopping in front of me. She waved a hand in my face, her bracelets clattering like wind chimes in a hurricane. She smelled of heavy musk and hairspray. "This is Harper," Ethan said quickly, refusing to meet my eyes. "She manages the household affairs." "A pleasure, ma'am," I said, dropping a stiff curtsy. "Cute," Bianca dismissed me, turning back to Patricia. "I brought you a little something. Pat, just a token from my last trip to Paris." She pulled a bright orange box from her oversized handbag. Patricia gasped, her hands trembling as she accepted it. She tore open the packaging to reveal a silk scarf printed with horse bits and stirrups. "Oh, Bianca and Hermes," Patricia squealed, wrapping the garish orange fabric around her neck. "It is exquisite, feel this silk. Ethan, it is like water." I glanced at the scarf. The hem was machine-stitched, not hand-rolled. The horse on the pattern looked less like a noble steed and more like a depressed donkey. It was a $20 fake from a street vendor, likely bought in downtown Los Angeles, not Paris. "Only the best for my future family," Bianca winked. We moved to the dining room. I had set the table with my grandmother's silver and the good crystal items that technically belonged to me, but currently served to impress the woman trying to steal my life. I served the first course, a lobster bisque with cognac cream. "So, Bianca," Ethan started, trying to sound authoritative as he unfolded his napkin, "tell us more about your holdings. Mom mentioned oil." "Oh, huge holdings," Bianca said, blowing on a spoonful of soup. "Massive. My late husband, Big Jim, he owned half of West Texas, pump jacks as far as the eye can see. We have so much oil we do not know what to do with it. I have people calling me every day, begging to buy me out. It must be volatile with the current market fluctuations," I said softly from the corner where I stood holding a wine bottle. "I read that the Brent crude index dropped 3% yesterday due to the OPEC surplus." The table went silent. Bianca froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She blinked rapidly, her false lashes fluttering like panicked moths. "Excuse me," she asked, her smile faltering. "The oil market," I repeated, keeping my face impassive. "Are your holdings primarily in light sweet crude or heavy sour? The refining costs are quite different, affecting the net royalties." Bianca looked at Ethan. Panic flashed in her eyes. She clearly did not know the difference between crude oil and olive oil. "Harper," Patricia snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "Do not bore our guest with trivial details. She is an owner, not a laborer. She has people to handle the math." "Exactly," Bianca recovered, puffing out her chest. My portfolio managers handle the crude sweetness. I just sign the checks. I do not clog my mind with the boring stuff. I focus on the vision. Right, Ethan said, glaring at me. Vision, that is what matters. Harper, pour the wine, and stop talking. I moved to the table to pour the Cabernet. It was a vintage bottle from my private cellar, worth $400. Bianca grabbed the glass by the bowl, warming the wine with her hand, a cardinal sin for any true connoisseur, and took a massive gulp. She smacked her lips. Is this a blend? It tastes a bit fruity. I usually only drink French wine, from the region of France. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. It is a single vineyard Cabernet from Napa Valley, ma'am. One of the finest. Well, it is okay for a table wine. She shrugged. When we are married, Ethan, we will stock the cellar with real wine. Champagne, the kind with the gold flakes in it. Of course, Ethan agreed, mesmerized by her cleavage. The dinner progressed, and with every glass of wine, Bianca became bolder and more obnoxious. She critiqued the crown molding. She said the chandelier looked dusty. She looked at the hand-painted wallpaper in the dining room, a masterpiece I had restored myself over 3 months, and wrinkled her nose. You know, Ethan, she said, leaning back and picking her teeth with a fingernail, this house has potential, but it is so gated. It smells like old money, but not the good kind. It smells like a library. We have been meaning to renovate, Patricia lied. We just have not had the time. I will fix that, Bianca declared, waving her fork around. Once the papers are signed and I move in, I'm going to drop $2 million on a total remodel. We will rip out all this dark wood, paint everything white and gold, Versace style, marble floors everywhere, statues of lions. It needs to scream luxury. I gripped the neck of the wine bottle. She wanted to tear out the mahogany paneling. She wanted to paint over the frescoes. It was like hearing a vandal plan to spray paint the Sistine Chapel. That sounds expensive, Ethan said, his eyes widening at the mention of $2 million. Pocket change, Bianca scoffed. But we need space. I have a lot of clothes. I will need the master suite, obviously, and the guest rooms for my shoe collection. She paused, her gaze sliding over to me with a predatory glint. But what about her? Where will she sleep? Patricia smiled, a cruel, tight expression. Oh, do not worry about Harper. She is very adaptable. I was thinking, Bianca said, tapping her chin. I saw a little shed in the backyard, near the rose bushes. It looks cozy. Maybe she could stay there, since she likes getting her hands dirty so much. She could be the gardener. I need someone to prune the roses. My hands are too delicate for thorns. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees in temperature. Ethan looked at his plate. Patricia looked delighted. They were actually considering it. They were imagining me, the woman who owned the roof over their heads, sleeping in the tool shed like a stray dog. That is a brilliant idea. Bianca? Patricia clapped her hands. Harper loves that shed. She spends all her time there anyway. It would be perfect. She can earn her keep by maintaining the grounds. Harper, Ethan asked, finally looking at me. What do you think? It would give you your own space, and you would not be underfoot. I looked at the 3 of them, the greedy mother, the spineless husband, and the fraudster with the fake tan. They were discussing my displacement as if I were a piece of old furniture they wanted to move to the garage. I walked over to Bianca's side to refill her glass. My shadow fell over her plate. A shed, I repeated, my voice silky smooth. You think I belong in a shed? Well, if the shoe fits. Honey? Bianca smirked, holding out her glass. I tipped the bottle. The dark red liquid flowed into the crystal goblet. I watched it rise. I watched it reach the rim, and I did not stop. The wine overflowed, cascading down the side of the glass, splashing onto her white mink coat, staining the fake fur a gruesome, bloody red. It pooled on the tablecloth and dripped onto her lap. Oops, I said, my face completely deadpan. My hand slipped. "Ah!" Bianca shrieked, jumping up. "My coat. My designer coat. You clumsy idiot. This is mink. Do you know how much this cost?" "About $50 at a thrift store," I suggested helpfully. "Get her out of here," Patricia screamed, throwing her napkin at me. "Ethan, do something. She ruined Bianca's coat." "Harper, get to the kitchen," Ethan yelled, trying to dab at Bianca's coat with his napkin, only smearing the wine further. "I am so sorry. Bianca, she is clumsy. She is useless. I will buy you 10 new coats." "I need the bathroom," Bianca wailed. "I need to wash this off." "Upstairs. First door on the left," Patricia directed. Bianca stormed out of the room, her high heels clicking furiously on the hardwood. Ethan and Patricia followed her, fawning and apologizing, leaving me alone in the dining room. I stood there for a moment, listening to the chaos upstairs. Then, I moved with calm precision. I reached across the table and picked up Bianca's wine glass. I held it by the stem, careful not to smudge the bowl where her greasy fingerprints were pressed clearly into the glass. I took a linen napkin and wrapped the glass carefully, placing it into the deep pocket of my apron. Then, I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. The white limousine was waiting. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the license plate. LUV 2LUV, the vanity plate read. I snapped a high-resolution photo. Then I took a picture of the rental sticker on the bumper, which clearly displayed the name of a budget car rental agency in the valley. Not a private chauffeur service. "Enjoy your renovation plans, Bianca," I whispered to the empty room, "because the only thing you are going to be remodeling is a prison cell." I took the wrapped glass and the photos and walked back to the kitchen. I stripped off the ridiculous maid costume and threw it into the trash compactor. I retrieved my phone and sent a message to my private investigator. Attaching the photos. Subject priority analysis. Message. I have fingerprints on a glass and a plate number. I need a full background check by tomorrow morning. I want to know who she really is, who she owes money to, and exactly how fake those diamonds are. I hit send. Upstairs. I could hear Bianca screaming about dry cleaning bills. I poured myself a glass of the vintage Cabernet using a fresh glass, of course, and took a sip. It tasted like victory. The silence in the house over the next 48 hours was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air in a room where all the oxygen had been slowly siphoned out. It was a silence that pressed against your eardrums, filled with unsaid words and secret panic. I knew before he did that the end had come for his career. My contacts in the city are extensive, and news of a public meltdown at Zenith Corp travels fast. On Tuesday morning, Ethan was summoned to the Human Resources Department. He was not offered a severance package. He was escorted out of the building by security, clutching a cardboard box filled with his stapler and a framed photo of himself. He had been fired for gross incompetence and falsifying productivity reports, but he did not come home and tell his wife he had lost his job. He did not come home and ask for support. Instead, he drove around the city for 6 hours, burning gas he could not afford, terrified of the reality that was crashing down on him. When he finally walked through the door at 5 o'clock, he told me he had taken a personal day to strategize his transition into high-level consulting. He looked manic. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, darting around the room as if the repo men were already hiding in the curtains. Desperation is a potent fuel, and Ethan was running on a full tank. He needed Bianca St. Clair's millions, and he needed them immediately, on Wednesday afternoon. The summon came. "Harper, come into the living room," Patricia called out. Her voice was too high, too bright. It sounded like the voice of a dentist telling a child that the drill would not hurt. I walked in. They were seated side by side on the long leather sofa, presenting a united front. The coffee table had been cleared of magazines and coasters. In the center sat a single, thick document bound in a blue folder. Ethan sat forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles were white. He looked like a man about to jump off a cliff who had convinced himself he could fly. "Sit down, Harper," Ethan said, gesturing to the armchair opposite them. I sat, The leather felt cold against my legs. What is this? Ethan? We need to talk about the future, he began, his voice trembling slightly before he steadied it. My future, the family's future. You know that I am destined for great things. Harper, you have always known that. I know you believe that, I said neutrally. I do not just believe it, it is a fact, he snapped, his patience fraying instantly. But greatness requires capital, it requires resources, and let us be honest. Harper, you cannot provide that. You are a wonderful homemaker. Sure, you keep the house clean, you cook, but financially, socially, you are an anchor. We discussed this, Patricia interjected, smoothing her skirt. It is not an insult, dear. It is just biology. Some people are lions, and some are gazelles. Ethan is a lion. Right, Ethan said. And a lion cannot be starved. I have an opportunity. Harper, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with Bianca. She wants to merge our assets. She wants to build an empire with me, but she has conditions. He pushed the blue folder across the marble table toward me. What is this? I asked, not touching it. It is a legal framework, Ethan said, using his best corporate buzzwords. We call it a marriage restructuring agreement. I stared at him. A what? Open it, Patricia urged. Read it. It is very generous. I opened the folder. The document inside was drafted on legal stationery, likely downloaded from a template website. I scanned the first page, and the sheer audacity of the words made my breath hitch in my throat. It was not a separation agreement, it was a servitude contract. Clause 1, Ethan explained as I read. We file for a legal divorce. This is purely a formality. Harper. It is just paperwork to satisfy the legal requirements, so I can marry Bianca and unlock her trust fund. $50 million. Clause 2, I read aloud, my voice steady. Harper Whitmore agrees to vacate the master suite and relocate to the auxiliary dwelling unit. The shed, Patricia corrected helpfully. It is cute. We will put a space heater in there for the winter. Clause 3, I continued reading, feeling a cold fury spreading through my veins like ice water. Harper Whitmore will retain residence on the property under the title of domestic associate. Duties include meal preparation, housekeeping, groundskeeping, and general maintenance, compensation room and board. I looked up. You want to divorce me? Marry another woman. Move her into my bedroom, and keep me here as your unpaid maid. Not a maid, Ethan said, looking hurt. A domestic associate. It is a vital role. Harper, you would be part of the team. Think about it. You have no money. You have no job. If we divorce the normal way, where would you go? You would be on the street. This way. You get to stay in your home. You get food. You get security. And when the money starts rolling in from Bianca, I will take care of you. I will buy you a new car. Maybe even a small salary eventually. He is doing this for you. Harper, Patricia added, leaning forward with a look of sickening pity. Bianca is a very jealous woman. She wanted you gone completely. But Ethan fought for you. He told her. No, Harper is family. She stays. He convinced Bianca to accept this arrangement. It is a modern solution for modern times. Modern times? I repeated. This sounds like feudalism. Patricia, don't be dramatic. She waved a hand. Look at the big picture. Men of status throughout history have had multiple women. One for the public, for the business, for the image, and one for the home, for the comfort. Bianca is the public wife. She has the money and the connections. You are the private wife. You are the one who knows how Ethan likes his eggs. It is a perfect division of labor. So, I said, closing the folder slowly, I lose my husband, my dignity, and my freedom, and in exchange, I get to live in a tool shed and scrub Bianca's toilets. You are looking at it all wrong. Ethan stood up, pacing the room. You are being selfish. Harper, I am trying to save us. Do you have $50 million? No. Do you have a plan to save us from From financial stagnation, no. You just tinker in your studio. I am the one out there making the hard choices. I am the one sacrificing my morality for the greater good. Sacrificing your morality? I asked, raising an eyebrow. It looks a lot like you are selling yourself to the highest bidder. It is a business merger, he shouted, his face turning red. Honey, it is not cheating if it is for the family's future. Think of it as a strategic acquisition, and you fit the role of the support staff. That is just the reality of your skill set. The room felt incredibly small. The walls seemed to be closing in, painted with the invisible ink of their betrayal. I looked at the chandelier above us. I had cleaned every crystal on that fixture by hand. I looked at the rug beneath our feet. I had bought it at an auction in Istanbul. Every inch of this house screamed my name, and they were deaf to it. And what if I refuse? I asked. My voice was quiet, barely a whisper. Ethan stopped pacing. He turned to me, and for the first time, the mask of the benevolent husband slipped completely, revealing the cornered rat underneath. Then you leave, he said cold, hard, and final. And you leave with nothing. Nothing, I asked. I have consulted lawyers, he lied. I knew he had not. He could not afford a lawyer. California is a community property state, Harper, but since you have contributed zero income to this marriage, and since the house is in my family's name, he trailed off, waiting for me to correct him. He genuinely believed it. He believed his own lie that he had told his mother 5 years ago. He had told Patricia that he bought the house. He had told her he paid the mortgage, and over the years, he had told the lie so many times that it had rewritten his own memory. He thought my inheritance was just a small down payment, long since irrelevant compared to his hard work. The house is yours, I asked, baiting him. It is my name on the mailbox, isn't it? He sneered. I pay the bills, I pay the mortgage. If we go to court, I will crush you. I will prove that you were a dependent spouse who refused to work. You will get nothing, no alimony, no settlement. You will be homeless. Harper. Homeless. Patricia nodded in agreement. He is right, dear. The law is on the side of the provider. And let's be honest. Who would hire you? You are 32 years old with a gap on your resume the size of the Grand Canyon. You are unqualified for the real world. Ethan is offering you a lifeline. Don't be too proud to grab it. The claustrophobia intensified. Their stupidity was a physical weight pressing on my chest. They were threatening to kick me out of my own house, based on a legal understanding they learned from television dramas. So, Ethan leaned down, placing his hands on the table, invading my personal space. What is it going to be? Do you sign the papers, accept your new role, and live comfortably under my protection, or do you walk out that door and become a beggar? I looked at the pen he had placed next to the folder. It was a cheap ballpoint pen, chewed at the end. I needed time. The report from the private investigator was due tomorrow morning. I needed that evidence. If I kicked them out now, it would be satisfying, but it would be messy. I wanted the total destruction of their fantasies. I wanted Bianca in the room. I wanted the police involved. I wanted the stage set for a tragedy, not just an argument. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump, feigning defeat. I let a tremor enter my hand as I reached for the folder. This is a lot to process, I whispered. Divorce, the shed, Bianca. It is a transition, Patricia soothed, her eyes gleaming with victory. Transitions are hard, but think of the reward. We will be rich, Harper. We will all be taken care of. I need time, I said, pulling my hand back. I cannot sign this right this second. I need to say goodbye to my marriage. Ethan stood up straight, a smug smile spreading across his face. He exchanged a look with Patricia. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was mourning the loss of him, not the loss of my faith in humanity. That is fair, Ethan said benevolently. I am a reasonable man. I will give you 24 hours, until tomorrow evening. But Harper, make sure the guest room is prepped. Bianca is coming over tomorrow night to finalize the details. I want this signed before she gets here. 24 hours, I repeated. Okay. Good girl, Patricia said, standing up and smoothing her dress. I knew you would see reason. Now, go make some tea. All this negotiating has made me parched. And Harper, Ethan called out as I stood up, clutching the blue folder to my chest like a shield. Start moving your things to the shed, just the essentials. We do not want the main house cluttered with your trinkets. I will, I said. I will move everything that matters. I walked out of the living room, feeling their eyes on my back. They were already celebrating. I could hear them whispering as I ascended the stairs. I told you she would fold, Ethan bragged. She has nowhere else to go. We need to call Bianca, Patricia giggled. Tell her the maid position is filled. I reached the top of the stairs and walked into the master bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. I walked to the window and looked down at the garden, at the small, renovated guest house they called a shed. It was actually a beautiful studio. Fully equipped, I would not mind living there, but that was not the point. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from my lawyer. Mr. Sterling. Text. The eviction notices are drafted. The restraining orders are ready to be filed. Just say the word. I typed back. Text. Hold fire. Tomorrow night, I want to catch the whole Rat King in one trap. I looked at the marriage restructuring agreement in my hand. I walked over to the shredder in the corner of the office, the one Ethan never used, and fed the document into it. The sound of the paper tearing was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. They gave me 24 hours to accept my fate. I would use every single minute of it to ensure that their fate was sealed, stamped, and delivered with a side of cold, hard reality. The countdown had begun. The email arrived at exactly 5:45 in the morning, accompanied by a soft, cheerful chime that belied the nuclear warhead of information contained within it. I was sitting in my studio, wrapped in a thick wool cardigan, a mug of black coffee steaming in my hand. I had not slept. Sleep felt like a luxury for people who were not currently plotting the systematic dismantling of their own lives. I clicked open the attachment from my private investigator, a man named Reynolds, who charged $300 an hour and was worth every penny. The subject line read, Subject Report. Bianca Sade, Claire alias confirmed. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the PDF. The first thing I saw was a mugshot. It was unflattering, stripped of the contouring makeup and the soft lighting of high-end spas. The woman in the photo looked tired, angry, and undeniably like the billionaire who had spilled wine on my floor the night before. Name Betty Sue Higgins. D.O.B. March 12th, 1982. Known aliases. Bianca Street. Claire, Baroness von Habsburg. Dr. Elizabeth Stone. Status wanted. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. She was not just a fraud. She was a career criminal. Betty Sue Higgins had active warrants in Nevada for check fraud, in Arizona for identity theft, and a particularly nasty civil judgment in Florida involving an 80-year-old man and a non-existent condominium development. I scrolled down to the financial section. Reynolds was thorough. The St. Clair mining fortune was a fabrication entirely. Betty Sue had zero assets. In fact, she had negative assets. She owed $42,000 to a hard money lender in Las Vegas, another $12,000 to the IRS, and her credit score was a 350. The limousine she had arrived in was a 2-hour rental paid for with a prepaid debit card. The mink coat was indeed a knockoff she had likely shoplifted. She was not looking for a husband to help her manage her empire. She was looking for a mark. She was looking for a fresh identity and a roof over her head before the law or the loan sharks caught up with her, and in Ethan and Patricia. She had found 2 marks so blinded by greed they had practically painted a target on their own backs. I closed the laptop and walked over to the wall safe hidden behind a canvas of a stormy seascape I had painted years ago. I spun the dial left, right, left. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside lay the paperwork that defined my reality. a reality Ethan had chosen to ignore for 5 years. I pulled out the grant deed. There it was, in black and white, Harper Anna Whitmore, a single woman, as her sole and separate property. My grandmother had left me this house 3 months before I married Ethan. It was never marital property. Next to it was the prenuptial agreement. I remembered the day Ethan signed it. He had been so eager to get to the wedding rehearsal, so confident that my little art hobby would never amount to anything, that he had skimmed the pages. Joking that he did not care about my pottery collection, he had signed away any claim to my business, my inheritance, and any appreciation of my assets. He had signed it because he thought he was the prize, and that I was lucky to have him. You never read the fine print, did you, Ethan? I whispered to the empty room. I placed the documents in a waterproof satchel. Then, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling, my lawyer. It was 6 a.m, but Sterling was the kind of shark who slept with one eye open. Harper, his voice was gravelly but alert. Is it time? It is time, I said. Betty Sue Higgins, that is her name. She is a fugitive. I want the police on standby, but not at the house. Have them wait at the gate. I want to handle the eviction personally before they take her into custody. Understood, Sterling replied. And the restraining orders for the other two? File them, I said. Effective immediately upon service. I want them out of my house, out of my business, and out of my life by midnight. I will have the courier there at 8 o'clock tonight, Sterling promised. Good luck. Harper. I do not need luck, I said. I have the deed. My next call was to Frank, the head of the private security firm that patrolled Sapphire Hills. I had a contract with them for the estate, paid for by my business. Frank, this is Harper Whitmore. I need a 4-man team at my residence tonight at 8:30. Full tactical gear. I anticipate a hostile removal of 3 individuals. Copy that. Mrs. Whitmore, Frank said without hesitation. We will be invisible until you give the signal, with the legal and physical force secured. I turned my attention to the assets. The house was filled with items that were not just expensive, but irreplaceable. The Ming vase in the hallway, the first edition Hemingway in the library, the collection of silver snuff boxes Patricia liked to play with. I spent the next 3 hours in a silent, efficient frenzy. I moved the smaller, high-value items into my studio, which had a biometric lock that only I could open. For the larger items, like the vase, I swapped them with the high-quality replicas I used for staging. I had made them myself for practice. To the untrained eye, and Ethan and Patricia were untrained eyes, they looked identical. But if Patricia decided to smash something on her way out in a fit of rage, she would be smashing plaster and resin, not a $50,000 antique, by noon. The house was a stage set, and I was the director. I walked back into the main house, composing my face into a mask of defeated resignation. I found Ethan and Patricia in the sunroom. They were huddled over Ethan's iPad, scrolling through a travel website. Look at this one. Mom, Ethan said, pointing at the screen. The Royal Suite on the Silver Whisper. It goes from Venice to Monte Carlo. $10,000 a night, but with Bianca's money, that is nothing. We could book the whole deck. Oh, it is divine, Patricia squealed, clapping her hands. We must go in the spring. I need a new wardrobe. Bianca said she knows a personal shopper in Milan. We should put a deposit down, Ethan mused. Tapping his credit card on the table, it was the same card that had been declined at the gas station last week, but in his mind, it was already linked to the St. Clair fortune. I will just put it on the credit. Once we sign the papers tonight, I can pay it off in a single lump sum. Do it, Patricia urged. We deserve a celebration after putting up with all this. I watched them for a moment, marveling at their capacity for self-deception. They were literally spending money they did not have, based on a marriage to a woman who did not exist, to celebrate the destruction of the only person who actually supported them. Ethan, I said softly. They both jumped. Ethan quickly turned the iPad over, hiding the screen. Harper, he said, his voice taking on that fake, stern tone he used when he wanted to feel authoritative. Have you made your decision? The 24 hours are almost up. I have, I said, looking at the floor. I have been thinking about what you said, about my lack of contribution, about the family's future. And Patricia leaned forward, her eyes hungry. And you are right, I said. I cannot provide what Bianca can. I cannot give you $50 million. So you agree. Ethan stood up, a grin breaking across his face. You will sign the papers. You will accept the role of domestic associate. I will sign. I lied. But I want it to be official. I want Bianca here. I want her to witness the transition. If I am going to hand over my position as your wife, I want to do it properly. Tonight. Yes, of course. Ethan pumped his fist. That is perfect. Bianca has been texting me all morning. She is frantic. Apparently, her lawyers are pressuring her to unlock the trust fund by the end of the week. She said she needs the marriage certificate immediately. Then tell her to come at 8 o'clock, I said. Tell her to bring her luggage. If she is going to be the lady of the house, she should move in tonight. Oh, she is ready, Patricia laughed. She has been living in a hotel. Poor thing. She will be so relieved to finally come home. Living in her car, I corrected silently. I will call her right now, Ethan said, already dialing. Harper, you are doing the right thing. I know it is hard, but you will see. This is better for everyone. You will be happier in the shed, less pressure. I am sure I will be, I said. I turned to leave, but Patricia called out, Harper, since tonight is a celebration, make sure dinner is special. Maybe that lobster thermidor again, and try not to burn the sauce this time. We want to impress the new mistress of the house. I will make a meal you will never forget, I promised. I walked back to the kitchen. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. It was a text from Betty Sue saved as Bianca in Ethan's phone, which I had synced to my cloud account months ago for security. Message from Bianca to Ethan. Baby, are we on? My financial advisor is breathing down my neck. I need that paper signed tonight or the deal is off. She was panicking. The loan sharks were probably closing in. She needed to get into the house, establish residency, and maybe steal enough jewelry to skip town before the weekend. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 7 hours until showtime. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange state of calm. I packed a single bag. Not for me, but for the performance. I put some old clothes in it and left it by the back door. Visible, so they would think I was preparing to move to the shed. At 4 o'clock, I went to the wine cellar. I bypassed the good vintage I had served the night before. Instead, I reached for a bottle of $2 Chuck Cheap, vinegary wine that I used for cooking. I poured it into a crystal decanter. Tonight, they would drink swill, and they would praise it because they thought it was expensive. It was a petty revenge, but it pleased me. At 6 o'clock, Ethan came into the kitchen. He was whistling. He slapped me on the back, a gesture of camaraderie that made my skin crawl. You are a good sport. Harper, he said. I knew you would understand. Mom and I were just talking. Once the money comes in, we might buy you a new lawnmower. The one we have is a bit heavy for you to push around the estate. That is very generous of you. Ethan, I said, chopping onions. I have always wanted a self-propelled mower. See, he beamed. We are going to be a great team. You, me, Mom, and Bianca. One big, happy, wealthy family. He grabbed a carrot stick from the counter and crunched on it loudly before walking away. I looked at the knife in my hand. I looked at the onions. I was not crying. I had no tears left for them. I only had the cold, hard certainty of the law and the impending arrival of the truth. The sun began to set over Sapphire Hills, casting long shadows across the lawn. The estate looked beautiful in the golden light. It looked like a fortress. And tonight, I was going to pull up the drawbridge and watch the crocodiles eat the invaders. I went upstairs to change. I did not put on the maid's uniform. I put on a black dress, sharp, tailored, expensive. I put on my diamond studs. I applied a coat of red lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see a victim. I did not see a domestic associate. I saw the owner of Whitmore Restorations. I saw the granddaughter of Anna Whitmore. I saw the executioner. I checked my watch. 7:55. The sound of an engine rumbled in the driveway. It was not a limousine this time. It was a taxi. Betty Sue had run out of rental money. "She is here," Patricia shouted from downstairs. "Harper, get the door, and remember your place." "I remember," I whispered to my reflection. "I remember everything." I walked out of the bedroom, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor with the rhythm of a ticking clock. The countdown was over. Judgment Day had arrived. The sky opened up at exactly 8 o'clock, as if nature itself was applauding the impending disaster. It was not a gentle California drizzle. It was a torrential downpour, the kind that hammers against the roof and turns driveways into rivers. Thunder rattled the window panes of the foyer as I opened the front door. Standing on the porch, soaked to the bone because she was too cheap to buy an umbrella, was Bianca St. Clair, or rather, Betty Sue Higgins. Behind her, the taxi driver was already pulling away, eager to escape the storm, leaving 3 enormous, mismatched suitcases sitting in the puddles. "My hair!" Bianca shrieked, rushing past me into the house without a greeting. She was wearing a white jumpsuit that was now transparent in places due to the rain, revealing leopard print undergarments. "Do you have any idea how much a blowout costs in this city? Get me a towel now." "Welcome home, Bianca," Patricia cried, rushing from the living room with open arms, ignoring the wet dog smell emanating from her future daughter-in-law. "Oh, you poor thing. Harper, don't just stand there gaping like a fish. Get a towel and bring in Bianca's luggage. Be careful. I am sure they are full of couture." I looked at the suitcases. One was wrapped in duct tape. Another had a fragile sticker from an airline that went out of business in 2010. "I will get the luggage," I said. Stepping out into the rain, I grabbed the handles. They were surprisingly light, couture more like empty hopes and crumpled newspapers. I hauled them into the hallway, water dripping onto the marble floor I had polished that morning. "Leave them there," Bianca commanded, wiping her face with the Egyptian cotton towel Patricia had handed her. "And wipe those wheels. I do not want mud on my floors." My floors. The audacity was almost impressive. We moved into the living room. The atmosphere was electric with a manic, desperate energy. Ethan was pacing, holding a glass of whiskey, my whiskey, looking like a man who had just bet his life savings on a horse with 3 legs. "So," Bianca said, looking around the room with a critical sneer. She picked up a small bronze statue from the mantelpiece, a replica I had swapped in that afternoon. "This all has to go. It is too, gloomy. I want mirrors, lots of mirrors, and gold leaf on the ceiling. We need to brighten this place up, make it look like money." "Absolutely," Ethan agreed, nodding vigorously. "Whatever you want, babe. You have the vision. And that painting." She pointed to the portrait of my grandmother above the fireplace. "Who is that old bat? She looks like she is judging me." "That is the previous owner," Patricia said quickly. "We will take it down. We can put up a portrait of you and Ethan, something regal." "I like that," Bianca smirked. "Maybe with me on a throne." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "And you? Harper, why are you still dressed like that? Put on your uniform, if you are going to work for me. You need to look the part. Domestic associates do not wear cocktail dresses." "I will change later," I said, my voice calm. "First, we have business to conclude. The paperwork." "Right." Ethan clapped his hands. "The papers. Let's get this done. Bianca's financial team is waiting for the confirmation." I walked over to the coffee table and opened my briefcase. I pulled out the single sheet of paper, the petition for dissolution of marriage. It was simple, clean, and devastatingly final. "Here," I said, placing it on the table along with a pen. "Sign here, Ethan." Ethan looked at the paper. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his hand hovering over the line. Perhaps a memory of our wedding day flashed through his mind. Perhaps he remembered the vows he had made. "Sign it, baby," Bianca urged, pressing her body against his arm. $50 million. Think of the yacht. Think of the freedom, Patricia whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. He picked up the pen. I am sorry it had to end this way. Harper, he said, not looking at me. But you have to admit, this is for the best. You were never cut out for the high life. You will be happier in the background. You are a great helper. You will make a wonderful servant for us. He pressed the pen to the paper and scribbled his name, Ethan Harris. Done, Patricia cheered, clapping her hands. Finally, Bianca exhaled, grabbing the paper and looking at it as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Now we just need the marriage license. We can go to the courthouse first thing in the morning. I will take that, I said, reaching out and gently taking the divorce paper from Bianca's hand. I looked at the signature. It was legally binding. He had voluntarily signed away his marriage. He had officially declared his intent to dissolve our union. I folded the paper neatly and placed it back into my briefcase. I snapped the lock shut. The sound was loud in the sudden silence of the room. Click, click. Well, Ethan said, rubbing his hands together. That is settled. Now, Harper, go get the champagne, the real champagne. We have a lot to celebrate. Bianca threw her arms around Ethan's neck, kissing him sloppily on the cheek. Oh, honey, we are going to be so powerful, the king and queen of Sapphire Hills, finally. This house has a mistress who knows how to spend money, and a mother who knows how to guide them, Patricia added, raising her glass. They stood there, a tableau of greed and delusion, the fraudulent widow, the parasitic mother, and the traitorous husband. They were glowing with the warmth of their imaginary future. I stood in the center of the room, watching them. A laugh started deep in my chest. It was not a polite laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was a guttural, dark sound that clawed its way up my throat. Ha! I started, then louder. Ha 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 ha. They stopped celebrating. They turned to look at me. What is so funny? Ethan asked, frowning. Are you having a breakdown? Pull yourself together. Harper, it is unbecoming. A mistress who knows how to spend money, I repeated, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. A king and queen. Oh, this is rich. This is truly Shakespearean. I stopped laughing abruptly. My face went cold. I dropped the mask I'd been wearing for 5 years. The submissive wife, the patient daughter-in-law, the doormat she evaporated. In her place stood Harper Whitmore, the woman who restored history for a living and knew exactly how to spot a fake. You are right about one thing, Bianca, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. This house does deserve a mistress of caliber. It deserves someone who earned every single brick, every single crystal, every single blade of grass outside. What are you babbling about? Bianca sneered. Go get the champagne, servant. But here's the tragedy, I continued, taking a step toward them. None of you fit the description. In fact, none of you are even qualified to wipe the mud off the floors of this house, let alone own it. Excuse me, Patricia gasped, clutching her pearls. How dare you speak to us like that? You are the charity case here. You are the one living in Ethan's house. Ethan's house. I looked at my ex-husband. Is that what you told them? Ethan, is that what you told yourself? Ethan's face paled slightly. The confidence began to crack. Harper, stop it. You are embarrassing yourself. Go to the shed. No, I said. I do not think I will. I walked over to the sideboard and picked up the remote control for the large television mounted above the fireplace. You see, I said, I have prepared a little presentation for our celebration, a sort of welcome home gift. We do not want to watch your home movies, Bianca spat. Oh, trust me, I smiled, a shark-like grin that mirrored the one Bianca had given Patricia in the spa. You are going to want to watch this. It is a true crime documentary, my favorite genre. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. Turn that off, Ethan roared, his face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. He lunged toward me, trying to grab the remote, but I took a smooth step back. keeping the device out of his reach. Have you lost your mind? Harper, I told you to get out. Get your things and go to the shed before I drag you there myself. You are ruining the night. I am not ruining it. Ethan, I said, my voice calm and sharp as broken glass. I am illuminating it. You wanted a celebration. You wanted the truth. Well, here she is. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick dossier Reynolds had compiled. I did not hand it to him gently. I threw it. The heavy folder spun through the air and landed with a loud thwack right in the center of the coffee table, scattering the crystal coasters. Introduce yourself to the real love of your life, I commanded. What is this? Patricia scoffed, reaching for the folder with trembling hands. More of your petty jealousy. Did you print out some fake horoscopes? Read the first page. Patricia, I said. Read the name. It is not Bianca Street. Claire. Patricia flipped the cover open. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the document. Then, her mouth fell open. Her face went slack, the color draining away until she looked like a corpse in a floral dress. Betty. Sue. Higgins, she whispered. The name hung in the air like a foul odor. Who is Betty Sue Higgins? Ethan asked, looking confused. He turned to the woman in the white jumpsuit. Babe, what is she talking about? Bianca or Betty Sue did not answer. She had frozen. The arrogant posture was gone. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Her eyes darted to the door, then to the window, calculating an escape route that did not exist. Betty Sue Higgins, I narrated, my voice projecting clearly over the sound of the rain hammering against the roof. Former nail technician at the Glitter Tips Salon in Reno, Nevada, fired 6 months ago for stealing from the register, currently unemployed, currently homeless, and currently wanted in 3 states for check fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Liar, Patricia shrieked, throwing the file onto the floor. You fabricated this. Bianca owns oil wells. She has a trust fund. She is a saint. Claire. She is a gambler with a wicked addiction to slot machines, I corrected. And she owes $50,000 to a very unpleasant loan shark in Las Vegas. That is why she is here. Patricia. She is not here to merge empires. She is here to hide. Tell her. Bianca, Ethan pleaded, grabbing the woman's arm. Tell her she is crazy. Show her your bank account. Show her the millions. Betty Sue remained silent, her breathing coming in shallow, panicked gasps. She cannot tell you, I said, because the only thing in her bank account is an overdraft fee. I pointed the remote at the television. But if you do not believe the paperwork, perhaps you will believe the Las Vegas Police Department. I pressed play. The screen illuminated with a harsh, blue light. It was a digital copy of a wanted poster. High resolution, undeniable. The photo was a mugshot. It was clearly the woman standing in my living room, albeit with less makeup and more desperation in her eyes. Underneath the photo, the charges were listed in bold black letters: fraud, theft by deception, evading arrest. That is you, Ethan stammered, staring at the screen. He looked back at Betty Sue. He looked at the wet, cheap fabric of her jumpsuit. He looked at the diamonds on her fingers that suddenly looked very much like glass. Babe, why is your picture on the TV? Betty Sue slapped his hand away. The sultry Texan drawl vanished, replaced by a scratchy, frantic voice that sounded like it had smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years. Turn it off, she screamed at me. You witch! You had no right to dig into my past. Your past, I laughed dryly. Honey, this is your present. Ethan stumbled back, as if he had been physically struck. So, there is no oil, he asked, his voice cracking like a teenager's. There is no $50 million. Oil, Betty Sue spat, her face twisting into a sneer. I have never been to Texas in my life. I hate Texas. It is too hot. But the trust fund, Ethan whispered, his world collapsing. The merger, the yacht. We were going to buy a yacht. I was going to buy a bus ticket, Betty Sue yelled back. I needed a place to lay low. I thought I could string you along for a few months. get access to your accounts, maybe pawn some of this ugly furniture, and pay off my debts before Vinny breaks my kneecaps." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum where hope used to exist. Then, the screaming started. "You lied to me," Patricia shrieked, launching herself off the sofa. She looked like a feral cat. She pointed a shaking finger at Betty Sue. "I treated you like a queen. I bought you lunch. I let you insult my daughter-in-law. You told me you were a billionaire. You told me your son was a CEO," Betty Sue screamed back, getting right in Patricia's face. "You old hag. You said he ran Zenith Corp. You said he was a tycoon. I thought I had found a sugar daddy, not some broke loser who lives with his mother." "I am a director," Ethan shouted, trying to salvage his pride from the wreckage. "I am a strategic partner." "You are a clerk," Betty Sue laughed, a harsh, cackling sound. "I checked your LinkedIn while I was in the bathroom. Senior data entry. Are you kidding me? I was trying to marry a wallet, and I ended up with a coin purse. How dare you?" Ethan yelled. "I am a catch. I own this house. I own this estate." "You own nothing," Betty Sue retorted. "Look at you. You are wearing a suit from a department store clearance rack. I should have known. Real rich men do not brag about their money every 5 seconds. I was desperate. Okay, I saw the house, I saw the car, and I thought, okay, maybe he is just tacky. But you are not tacky. You are a fraud. You are just like me." "I am nothing like you," Ethan roared. "I am a respectable man. You are a criminal, a fugitive. Get out of my house. Get out before I call the police." "Call them," Betty Sue challenged, putting her hands on her hips. "Go ahead, and tell them what? That you tried to divorce your wife to marry a stranger for money. You think that looks good on a police report?" "You tricked us," Patricia wailed, sinking back onto the sofa and burying her face in her hands. "My scarf? The Hermes scarf? Is it fake too?" "Lady, I bought that scarf from a guy selling sunglasses out of a trunk on Venice Beach for $15, Betty Sue sneered. "And you wore it like it was the crown jewels. You people are so desperate to be rich you are blind." I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. It was magnificent. It was better than any play, any movie, any opera I had ever seen. The three of them, tearing each other apart, their greed colliding in a spectacular explosion of accusations. "You ruined everything." Ethan turned on his mother. "This is your fault. You found her. You brought her to the spa. You told me she was the one. You told me to dump Harper." "I did it for you," Patricia sobbed, looking up with mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. "I wanted you to have the best. How was I supposed to know she was a con artist? She had a Birkin bag." "It was a knockoff," Betty Sue yelled. "Just like your son's career." "Don't you talk about my son." Patricia lunged at Betty Sue, grabbing a handful of her hair extensions. "Get off me, you psycho!" Betty Sue shrieked, shoving Patricia back onto the couch. "Stop it!" Ethan got between them, holding his hands up. "Stop it. We have to focus. We have to fix this." He turned to me, his eyes wild with panic. He looked at me not as his wife, but as the only person in the room who wasn't currently having a psychotic break. "Harper," he panted. "Harper, listen. Okay. So she is a fake. We made a mistake. A big mistake. But we can fix it. We kick her out. Right. We kick her out. And we tear up those divorce papers. We go back to normal. You can stay in the master bedroom. I will not make you move to the shed. See, I am benevolent. I forgive you for digging this up. It was actually good that you did. You saved us." I stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated narcissism was breathtaking. He actually thought he could hit the rewind button. He thought that after trying to demote me to a servant, after signing divorce papers to marry a woman for money, he could just snap his fingers and I would resume my role as his obedient financier. "You forgive me?" I asked quietly. "Yes." Ethan nodded eagerly, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I forgive you for the embarrassment. We are a team, right? You and me. We built this life. We can get a restraining order against this Betty woman, and we can forget this ever happened. I will even let you cook dinner tonight. We can have that lobster." Betty Sue was busy stuffing the bronze statue she had critiqued earlier into her oversized handbag. "I am leaving," she muttered. "I am taking this for my time. Wasted a week on you losers." "Put that back," Patricia yelled. "That is my statue." "It is a fake," I said. They all stopped and looked at me. "What?" Ethan asked. "The statue," I said, pointing to the bronze figure Betty Sue was clutching. "It is a replica. Resin and paint, worth about $20. I moved the real one to a secure location this morning." Betty Sue looked at the statue, then at me. She dropped it on the floor. It bounced with a hollow thud instead of a metallic clang. "You knew," Ethan whispered. "You knew all day." "I knew everything," I said. "I knew she was a fraud. I knew you were going to sign the papers. I knew Patricia was going to cheer." I walked to the center of the room. Reclaiming the space, I stood tall, my posture rigid, radiating an authority they had never seen before. "You speak of forgiveness, Ethan," I said. "You speak of going back to normal. But there is no normal anymore. You destroyed normal the moment you looked at me and saw a maid instead of a partner." "Harper, be reasonable," Ethan pleaded, stepping toward me. "I was under stress. I was seduced. She manipulated me." "She told you what you wanted to hear," I corrected. "She held up a mirror to your own greed, and you fell in love with the reflection. You were not seduced. Ethan, you were sold, and you sold yourself cheap." "I am your husband," he shouted, trying to regain control. "I am the man of this house. I make the decisions." "No," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You do not?" "I am kicking her out." Ethan pointed at Betty Sue. "And you?" He pointed at me. "You are going to clean up this mess. You are going to fix this, because if you do not, I really will divorce you, and I will take the house. I will take everything. You think this file changes anything about us. It just proves I need to be more careful. But I still own this property. I still hold the cards." "Yeah," Patricia chimed in, finding her courage again. "This is Ethan's house. Get out, you imposter." She glared at Betty Sue. "And Harper, stop standing there looking smug. Go make us some tea. We have had a terrible shock." It was incredible. Even in the face of total humiliation, their entitlement remained intact. They believed the hierarchy of the house was immutable Ethan at the top, Patricia at his side, and me at the bottom. I looked at my watch. 8:30, right on cue. Heavy footsteps sounded on the front porch. Not the frantic clicking of heels or the shuffle of a taxi driver. These were the rhythmic, heavy boots of men who carried authority on their belts. Thud, thud, thud. A heavy fist pounded on the front door. "Who is that?" Patricia asked, her eyes widening. "Did you call the police on Betty?" "Not exactly," I said. "Open up," a deep voice boomed from outside. "Security." "It is security." Ethan let out a sigh of relief. "Thank God. You called Frank Good. Have him drag this trash out of here." He gestured violently at Betty Sue. Betty Sue looked ready to bolt through the window. "I am not going to jail," she hissed. "Nobody is going to jail just yet," I said, "unless you refuse to leave." I walked to the door. Ethan followed me, puffing out his chest, ready to give orders to the security team he thought worked for him. "Frank," Ethan called out as I opened the door. "Glad you're here. Listen, we have a trespasser. This woman here," he pointed back at Betty Sue. "She is a con artist. I want her removed from the premises immediately, and rough her up a little if you have to." 4 men stood in the doorway. They were dressed in black tactical gear. With the insignia of the private security firm on their chests, they were large, imposing, and completely unamused. Frank, the lead officer, stepped forward. He did not look at Ethan. He looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore," Frank said, nodding respectfully. "We are here as requested. Is the perimeter secure?" "It is, Frank," I said. Thank you for coming. Wait, Mrs. Whitmore? Ethan frowned. Why are you calling her that? I am Mr. Harris. I am the homeowner. I am the one giving the orders. Frank turned his head slowly to look at Ethan. His expression was one of mild annoyance, like a man looking at a yapping chihuahua. Mr. Harris, Frank said, his voice flat. My contract is with the owner of the property, and according to the deed on file with our office, and the instructions I received this morning, that is not you. Ethan froze. What? Harper? Patricia squeaked from the living room. What is he talking about? I turned back to face them. The final act was beginning, the audience was captive, and I held the only key. You asked for a show, Ethan, I said, walking back to the coffee table. I picked up the second document, the one I had retrieved from the safe that morning, the one I had kept hidden for 5 years. You kept saying this is your house, I said, holding the document up. You said it so many times you believed it, but believing a lie does not make it true. I pay the mortgage, Ethan stammered, but his voice was weak. The doubt was finally creeping in. You pay nothing, I said. You hand me a check for $500 once a month. The mortgage on this place is $12,000 a month. Who do you think pays the difference? You? You can't? Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. And actually, I smiled. There is no mortgage. I paid it off 3 years ago, with the proceeds from the restoration of the Vatican Embassy in D.C. Vatican Embassy, Patricia whispered. You fix broken plates. I restore national monuments, I corrected. And I earn in a week what your son earns in 5 years. I slammed the document down on the table next to the investigator's file. This is the grant deed, I announced. Read the name. Ethan, read it loud and clear. Ethan looked down. He saw the bold black letters. Harper Anna Whitmore. No, he whispered. No, this is fake. You printed this out, like the wanted poster. It is recorded at the county assessor's office, I said. And here, I pulled out another paper. This is the prenuptial agreement, the one you signed without reading because you were too busy staring at yourself in the mirror. Clause 4, Section B. Any property acquired by Harper Whitmore, by inheritance or purchase, remains sole and separate property, regardless of marital status. I looked at Betty Sue, who was watching this exchange with her mouth hanging open. You were right, Betty, I said to her. You were trying to scam a Mark who was poorer than you. Ethan doesn't own this house. He doesn't own the car. He doesn't even own the suit he's wearing. I paid for that on my Amex last month. Oh my God! Betty Sue started laughing. It was a hysterical, disbelief-filled sound. He is a scrub. He is a total scrub. Shut up! Ethan screamed, tears starting to form in his eyes. It is not true. Mom, tell her it is not true. Patricia was clutching her chest, looking around the room as if the walls were melting. But we are the Harris family. We are important. You are guests, I said coldly, and you have overstayed your welcome. I turned to Frank. Frank, I said, pointing to Ethan, Patricia, and Betty Sue. These 3 individuals are trespassing on my property. They have been asked to leave and have refused. Please escort them off the premises, immediately. With pleasure, ma'am, Frank said. He signaled to his men. Wait, Ethan shouted, backing away as a security guard approached him. You can't do this. I am her husband. We are married. Not anymore, I said, holding up the paper he had signed 10 minutes ago. You signed the petition for dissolution. You legally declared your intent to separate, and since this is my separate property, you have no right to be here. I didn't mean it, Ethan cried. I only signed it for the money, for the fake money. Intent is irrelevant, I said. The signature is ink. Harper, please, Patricia wailed, as a guard took her by the arm. It is raining. I am an old woman. You cannot throw me out into the storm. You were ready to throw me into a shed, I reminded her. You were ready to make me a servant in my own home. The rain will wash off. Patricia? The shame that sticks? Grab them, Frank ordered. The room erupted into chaos. Wait, stop everyone. Just stop. Ethan's voice cracked, spiraling into a desperate falsetto that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. He threw his hands up, stepping between Frank's imposing figure and the terrified form of his mother. It was a pathetic display of bravado, like a mouse trying to command a pride of lions. But the sheer volume of his panic caused the security team to pause for a fraction of a second. Ethan seized that moment of hesitation. He smoothed his suit jacket, though his hands were trembling so violently that the fabric rippled. He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to summon the ghost of the arrogance he had worn so comfortably just an hour ago. He turned his back on Betty Sue, effectively discarding her like a used napkin, and fixed his gaze on me. Okay, Ethan exhaled, forcing a tight, trembling smile. Okay, Harper, you have made your point. Point taken, loud and clear. He walked toward me, ignoring Frank's warning step forward. We have all had a long day, Ethan said, his voice taking on a sickeningly reasonable tone, the tone of a parent explaining simple math to a toddler. This woman, he gestured vaguely behind him at Betty Sue without looking at her. She is a fraud. We were tricked, both of us. She preyed on my ambition. Harper, can you blame a man for wanting to provide more for his family, for wanting to give you the world? I watched him, my face a mask of absolute indifference, the silence stretched, heavy and cold. So here is what we are going to do, Ethan continued, gaining a little more confidence from my silence. Frank, you can escort this imposter out. Get her out of my house. Harper, I am willing to overlook this outburst. I am willing to forgive you for bringing armed guards into our home and embarrassing my mother. We will tear up that piece of paper I signed. It was a mistake. I was under duress. We will pretend this night never happened. I am still the husband here. I am still the head of this household, and I am granting you permission to stay. We can go back to how things were. He reached out a hand, expecting me to take it, expecting me to fall to my knees in gratitude for his mercy. You allow me to stay, I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. Yes, Ethan nodded, mistaking my tone for submission. I am a generous man. Harper, I know you have nowhere else to go. I know you need me. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at his face. The delusion was so complete, so impermeable, that it was almost medically fascinating. Ethan, I said, stepping past his outstretched hand to the console table behind the sofa. I picked up a specific leather-bound ledger I had placed there earlier. I think there has been a fundamental misunderstanding of the economics of this relationship for the last 5 years. I opened the ledger. You work at Zenith Corp as a senior data entry coordinator, I stated, reading from the page. Your take-home pay, after taxes and benefits, averages $4,200 a month. Ethan flinched. That is private information. How did you... Quiet, I commanded, flipping a page. This house, this estate, consumes resources. Let us look at the overhead for last month alone, the electricity bill. Specifically for the climate control system Patricia insists on keeping at 68 degrees, was $1,200. The water bill for the landscaping was $800. The property taxes, amortized monthly, are $3,500. The insurance is $900. The pool maintenance, the security contract with Frank here, the housekeeper. I looked up at him. The total operating cost of this house is roughly $12,000 a month. Ethan, and that is before we buy a single grocery item or pay for Patricia's spa treatments. Ethan's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. You give me an envelope with $500 in it every month, I said, my voice hardening. You hand it to me like you are keeping me alive, like you are the great provider. Ethan, $500 does not even cover the dry cleaning bill for your suits and your mother's silk robes. But the mortgage, Ethan stammered, sweat beading on his upper lip. I pay the mortgage. There is no mortgage, I slammed the ledger shut, the sound like a gunshot in the room. I told you, I paid it off years ago. And even when there was one, who do you think paid it? Do you think your $4,000 covered a $12,000 lifestyle? Do the math. Ethan, you are a data entry clerk. Surely you can do basic subtraction. Then where? Patricia piped up from the sofa, her voice shrill and fearful. Where does the money come from? You are just a laborer. You play with mud. I am the owner of Whitmore Restorations, I declared, staring her down. The name hung in the air. Patricia blinked. I do not restore flea market pottery, I continued, my voice ringing with pride I had suppressed for too long. My firm is the primary contractor for the restoration of the City Hall Historical Archives. I hold the exclusive contract for the maintenance of the Getty Villas Antiquities Collection. Last year, I oversaw the facade restoration of the billionaire's row penthouses in Manhattan. I took a step closer to Ethan. He shrank back. My net income last year was just over $2 million, I said softly. That is roughly 50 times your salary. Ethan, I am not the maid. I am not the gardener. I am the bank. I am the economy of this family. I have been subsidizing your delusions of grandeur for 5 years because I promised your father I would look after you. But the subsidy just ended. Ethan looked like he had been hit by a freight train. He looked at the walls, the furniture, the ceiling, seeing them for the first time not as his birthright, but as charity. No, he whispered. That is impossible. You wear those old clothes. You work in the shed. I wear work clothes because I work, I snapped. And I work in a state-of-the-art studio that cost more to build than your entire lifetime earnings. You saw what you wanted to see. Ethan, you wanted a peasant wife to make yourself feel like a king, but you were never the king. You were just the jester. But the car. Ethan grasped at a straw. My Escalade. I drive it. It is mine. I laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. The Cadillac Escalade is a company vehicle, I explained. Registered to Whitmore Restorations, used for transporting delicate materials, and apparently, fragile egos. It is not in your name. Nothing is in your name. Ethan, not the car, not the house, not even the phone in your pocket. I pay the family plan. Ethan looked down at his phone as if it had burned his hand. So when you stand there, I continued, circling him like a shark, and you tell me you allow me to stay, when you tell me you forgive me, you are speaking to your landlord, you are speaking to your employer, and you are speaking to the woman who just fired you. Patricia let out a low moan and collapsed back onto the beige velvet sofa. She clutched a throw pillow to her chest, rocking back and forth. My house, she whimpered. My beautiful house. It was all a lie. Get off the furniture, Patricia, I said sharply. She froze, looking up at me with tear-filled, mascara-stained eyes. That sofa is silk velvet, I said, and you are covered in the stench of desperation and that cheap perfume. You have ruined it. I am going to have to throw it out. You are a monster, Patricia hissed. I am a realist, I countered. And reality is crashing down on you. I turned back to the coffee table and picked up the document Ethan had signed minutes earlier. The ink was barely dry. Now, let us discuss the legal standing of your presence here, I said, adopting the tone of a prosecutor. We are family, Ethan pleaded, his voice breaking. Harper, please, we are married. Community property. I have rights. Clause 7, I cited from memory, holding up the prenuptial agreement. In the event of a filing for dissolution of marriage, the non-owner spouse agrees to vacate the separate property residence immediately upon request. You signed this, Ethan, 5 years ago. I held up the petition for dissolution. And you signed this tonight? I said. You voluntarily initiated the divorce. You declared your intent to leave the marriage. Legally, the moment that ink hit the paper, our marital contract was severed in spirit, if not yet by the state. I looked at Frank. Frank, I said clearly, Mr. Harris is no longer a resident of this address. He has no lease. He has no ownership stake. He has no invitation. I pointed to Patricia. Mrs. Harris is a guest of Mr. Harris. Since he has no right to be here, neither does she. I pointed to Betty Sue, who was trying to inch toward the door unnoticed. And Ms. Higgins is a fugitive trespasser. I looked back at Ethan. His face was a mask of pure terror. He realized, finally, that there was no safety net. There was no fixing it. The world he thought he owned was dissolving under his feet. This means, I concluded, my voice hard as granite, that you are not a husband, you are not a homeowner. You are an intruder. You are unauthorized personnel in a secure facility. Harper, don't, Ethan begged, tears spilling over his cheeks. It is raining. We have no money. You froze the cards. I did not freeze the cards, Ethan, I corrected him. I simply removed my authorization for you to spend my money. You are free to spend your own. Oh, wait. You spent it all on a deposit for a cruise you will never take. I have nowhere to go, he whispered. You have the world, I said. Go conquer it. You are a lion. Remember, lions do not need charity from gazelles. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I brought up the security app connected to the smart home system. With a single tap, I disengaged the internal locks on the front gate and signaled the silent alarm that logged an incident report with the private security firm's central command. This created a permanent digital record of the eviction. Annihilate the fantasy. Frank, I said. Remove them. Security. Frank barked, his voice booming through the room. Move in. The 4 guards surged forward. The time for talking was over. The physical reality of my authority was about to be enforced. Ethan screamed as a guard grabbed his arm. Get your hands off me. I live here. I live here. Not anymore, sir, the guard said, spinning him around and marching him toward the door. Mom, Ethan yelled. Patricia was shrieking as another guard hauled her up from the sofa. She tried to grab a crystal vase from the side table, one of the replicas I had swapped in. That is mine, she screamed. I bought that. Evidence of theft, Frank noted calmly. Take it from her. The guard wrestled the vase from her grip. Patricia kicked and flailed, her heels digging into the rug, leaving streaks on the floor. You will pay for this. Harper, she screamed at me, her face contorted into a mask of pure ugliness. You ungrateful witch, I will tell everyone. I will ruin your reputation. Tell them, I said calmly, watching her being dragged away. Tell them exactly who paid for your life for 5 years. I have the receipts. Patricia, do you? Betty Sue, realizing the game was truly up, tried to make a run for it. She bolted toward the hallway, perhaps hoping to find a back exit or steal a piece of silver on her way out. Secure the perimeter, Frank shouted. The 4th guard tackled her before she made it 3 steps. She went down with a yelp, her fake Gucci bag skidding across the floor, spilling cheap lipstick and crumpled lottery tickets everywhere. I am suing, Betty Sue yelled, as they hoisted her up. I have rights. I am a victim here. You are a wanted felon, the guard said, clamping handcuffs onto her wrists, and we are handing you over to the sheriff at the gate. I stood in the center of the living room, the eye of the hurricane. I watched as the 3 parasites who had sucked the life out of me for years were systematically purged from my sanctuary. Ethan looked back at me one last time as he was shoved through the front door. His eyes met mine. There was no anger in them anymore, only a profound, bottomless shock. He looked like a child who had just been told Santa Claus was dead. Harper, he mouthed. Please. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved, the man I had protected, the man I had tried to build up. And I felt nothing. The cord was cut. The debt to his father was paid. Goodbye, Ethan, I said. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them, cutting off their screams. The silence that rushed back into the room was not empty. It was full. It was rich. It was the sound of ownership. I looked around my living room. It was messy. There were muddy footprints, There was a spilled drink. There was a cheap, ugly sofa that needed to be burned. But it was mine. Finally, completely, and undeniably mine. "Frank," I said to the head of security, who had remained behind to ensure the premises were clear. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." "Change the codes," I ordered. "Change the locks, and if they step 1 foot on the driveway again, call the police." "Already done, ma'am," Frank said. I walked over to the window and looked out into the darkness. The storm was raging outside, a chaotic swirl of wind and water. And out there, somewhere in the cold, wet night, the king and queen of Sapphire Hills were about to learn exactly what it felt like to be a peasant. The 4 security guards moved with the synchronized precision of a demolition crew, closing the distance between my authority and their delusion in seconds. Frank, the captain of the team, stood like a granite wall in the center of the foyer, his hand resting casually near his belt, signaling that this was not a negotiation. It was an eviction. "Frank," I said, my voice cutting through the hysterical sobbing echoing off the vaulted ceilings, "remove these 3 individuals from my property, immediately, if they offer even a single second of physical resistance, or if they refuse to walk. I want you to call the sheriff's department and file charges for criminal trespassing, attempted fraud, and harassment." "Understood. Mrs. Whitmore," Frank replied, his voice deep and bored, the voice of a man who had taken out trash much heavier than this. "No, no, you cannot do this," Ethan screamed, his legs giving out beneath him. He collapsed onto the marble floor, the same floor he had forced me to scrub on my hands and knees just days before. He crawled toward me, his expensive suit trousers which I had paid for sliding across the stone. He wrapped his arms around my ankles, burying his face in my shoes. It was a display of pathetic, sniveling cowardice that made my stomach turn. "Wifey Harper, baby, please," he wailed, his tears soaking into my leather pumps. "I am sorry I was brainwashed. She put a spell on me. I love you. Harper, I have always loved you. Do not throw me away. Give me a chance to fix this. I will be better. I will sleep in the shed. Just do not kick me out." I looked down at the man I had wasted 5 years of my life on. I did not see a husband. I did not see a partner. I saw a parasite that had finally realized its host was detaching it. I pulled my foot back, breaking his grip with a sharp, decisive kick. It was not violent, but it was final. He scrambled back, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "You do not love me, Ethan," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You never loved me. You only loved the comfort I provided. You loved the house. You loved the car. You loved the lifestyle. You only loved the ATM machine that shares my last name. And that machine is now out of order." "Get him up," Frank barked. 2 guards hoisted Ethan to his feet by his armpits. He dangled there, his feet scrabbling for purchase, weeping openly like a child who had dropped his ice cream cone. "And you," Patricia shrieked as a guard took hold of her elbow. She dug her heels into the rug, her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly entitlement. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I am the matriarch of this family." "Harper, tell them to stop. I am your mother-in-law. You cannot throw an old woman out into the rain. It is storming out there. I will catch pneumonia. I will die." I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space, forcing her to look into the eyes of the woman she had tormented for half a decade. "The rain?" I asked, tilting my head. "You are worried about the weather, Patricia. 10 minutes ago, you were sitting on that sofa planning to move me into a tool shed with no insulation. You were planning to turn me into your unpaid servant. You wanted to strip me of my dignity and my home." "That was different," she spat. "You are used to hardship. I am delicate." "You are not delicate," I corrected her. "You are cruel, and now you are homeless. I suggest you go find a sewer pipe somewhere. It is the only shelter that will match your personality." "You BH!" she screamed, lunging at me, her claw-like hands reaching for my hair. The guard jerked her back effortlessly. "That is assault, ma'am. Do not make me put you in cuffs like your friend." Across the room, Betty Sue was already in handcuffs, but that did not stop her mouth. She was being dragged toward the door, her heels leaving scuff marks on the floor, shouting obscenities that would make a sailor blush. "I am suing all of you," Betty Sue yelled. "My lawyer will destroy you. I have rights." "Your lawyer is a public defender," I called out to her. "Save your breath for the judge." "Let's go," Frank ordered. "Move them out." The procession began. It was the most beautiful parade I had ever witnessed. Ethan was dragged out first, still sobbing and reaching back toward me with a trembling hand. Patricia followed, wailing at the top of her lungs, her fake Hermes scarf trailing on the floor like a limp tail. Betty Sue brought up the rear, struggling against the cuffs, cursing the day she met the Harris family. They tried to grab things on their way out. Ethan reached for a silver picture frame on the entry table. Patricia tried to snatch an umbrella from the stand. "Leave it," Frank shouted. "You take only what is on your back. Everything else belongs to the property owner." The guard slapped Ethan's hand away from the frame. "Walk." They were shoved through the heavy oak double doors and out onto the porch. The storm was raging with biblical intensity. The wind howled, whipping the rain sideways in stinging sheets. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees since sunset. I walked to the doorway, stopping just inside the threshold where it was dry and warm. I watched them stumble down the front steps. Ethan slipped on the wet stone, falling hard onto his hip. He scrambled up, his suit instantly soaked, his hair plastered to his skull. Patricia shrieked as the cold rain hit her, her makeup running in black rivulets down her face, turning her into a grotesque clown. Betty Sue just stood there, shivering violently, the water making her white jumpsuit cling to her skin like wet tissue paper. They were marched down the long driveway. The security guards did not offer them umbrellas. They did not offer them a ride. They marched them to the perimeter of the estate like prisoners of war being exchanged at the border. I followed them at a distance, standing on the covered veranda, a glass of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon in my hand. I had poured it while they were screaming. It was a 1996 vintage, bold and complex, with notes of dark cherry and vengeance. At the main gate, the guards shoved them through the pedestrian exit. "Get off the property," Frank commanded. "If I see any of you within 500 feet of this gate, I am calling the cops. And Mr. Harris, if you try to contact Mrs. Whitmore, you will be violating the restraining order that is being filed as we speak. Walk away." Frank stepped back inside. The heavy iron gate swung shut. Clang. The sound was metallic, final, and deeply satisfying. It was the sound of a prison cell closing. But in this case, the prisoners were on the outside, and I was the one who was free. The electronic lock engaged with a sharp, high-pitched beep. The red light on the keypad turned solid, locked out. I walked up to the large floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the street. The glass was reinforced, soundproof, and tinted. I could see them, but they could only see their own wet, miserable reflections. On the sidewalk, the reality of their situation finally hit them. They were standing in a deluge, with no car, no money, no phones. The guards had confiscated the company phones I paid for, and nowhere to go. Betty Sue turned on Ethan. The illusion of the billionaire widow and the CEO was gone, replaced by the primal anger of two con artists who had scammed each other. "You idiot!" Betty Sue screamed, her voice muffled by the glass, but her actions clear. She flew at Ethan, her fingernails raking down his face. "You wasted my time. I could have been in Mexico by now. You broke loser." Ethan tried to shield his face, pushing her away. "Get off me. You ruined my life, you crazy witch." Patricia collapsed into a puddle of mud near the gutter. She did not try to stand up. She sat there in the filth, the ruin of her silk dress soaking up the brown water. She pounded her fists against the pavement, her mouth open in a silent scream of despair. She looked at the house, my house glowing warmly in the night, a beacon of the comfort she had taken for granted and then foolishly tried to steal. She realized, in that cold, wet moment, that she had lost everything. She had lost the status. She had lost the luxury. She had lost the right to look down on anyone ever again. Ethan looked up at the window. He saw me standing there, silhouetted against the warm light of the chandelier, sipping my wine. He raised a hand, pressing it against the glass of the gate, mouthing words I could not hear, but I knew what they were. I am sorry. Let me in, please. I took a slow sip of wine. I looked him right in the eye, and then I raised my glass in a mock toast. Cheers to your new life, Ethan. I hope it is everything you deserve. I reached out and grabbed the heavy velvet drapes, the ones Patricia had said were too dark and wanted to replace with gold. I pulled them shut. Swish. The sight of them vanished. The chaos, the ugliness, the desperate poverty of their souls. It was all blocked out. All that remained was the serene, quiet beauty of my home. I turned around. The living room was quiet. The air was still. But there was a lingering scent, the smell of cheap perfume, wet dog, and betrayal. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was my personal phone, the one only important people had the number for. I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. Whitmore Restorations, cleaning crew. A voice answered. Hello? I said, my voice calm and light. This is Harper Whitmore. I need an emergency service at my residence in Sapphire Hills. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. What seems to be the problem through a spill? Something like that, I said, looking at the spot where Ethan had groveled on the floor. I need a full decontamination, deep steam clean, fumigation, sanitization of all surfaces. I had a severe infestation of pests in the house tonight. Rats, snakes, parasites. They have been removed, but they left a terrible mess behind. We can have a crew there in an hour, ma'am. Perfect, I said. Scrub it until it shines. I want every trace of them erased. I want this house to smell like lemon, lavender, and absolute freedom. We will make it spotless, Mrs. Whitmore. I know you will, I said. I hung up the phone. I took another sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I walked to the center of the room, kicked off my heels, and dug my toes into the thick, expensive rug. I was alone. I was single. I was rich. And for the first time in 5 years, I was home. The screen fades to black. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I enjoyed writing it. Let me know in the comments where you are all watching from. I would love to hear from our global community and read your thoughts on Harper's Revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the Crimson Drama Stories channel, like the video, and smash that hype button so we can keep bringing you more amazing stories like this one. See you in the next video.